My name is Taylor Monroe. I'm 29 years old and a former CIA officer, and I woke up in pitch-black darkness, my pulse hammering like a war drum. Cold droplets trickled down my face as the dank scent of moldy wood filled my nostrils. My hands were bound behind me, wrists chafing against rough rope. Somewhere above, I heard muffled laughter and the clink of fine crystal glasses. The last thing I remember is raising a toast in the Sinclair dining hall, the chandelier's crystals shimmering as family members exchanged polite smiles and bitter undercurrents. They'd gathered under the guise of reunion, but now I realized the reunion was a trap, a high-stakes game where I am the unsuspecting pawn. I felt around blindly, fingers brushing against a metal grate. Water dripped rhythmically, echoing like the ticking of a sinister clock. Panic surged as I recalled the ominous bet. $50,000 per wager, each family member staking their fortune on my fate. The gasoline scent of their hidden motives seeped into my mind. My breath caught. I know time is running out. Every second here could be the last. With trembling determination, I steel myself to escape and expose the Sinclair family's dark secret. I was born on a crisp autumn morning in 1996, in a sprawling estate nestled on the edge of Lake Hemlock, where the air always smelled faintly of damp pine and polished mahogany. My earliest memory is of the sun, filtering through the stained glass window of our grand foyer, painting the marble floor in jewel-toned patterns as I toddled barefoot across cold tiles. My parents, Victoria and Richard Sinclair, stood at the threshold, armed and twined, dressed in impeccable evening attire even at dawn. They smiled down at me, their faces the perfect masks of pride and expectation. From my very first breath, I was ensconced in privilege, raised on whispered discussions of diplomatic dinners and clandestine boardroom negotiation. Growing up as the only daughter in the Sinclair dynasty meant every birthday party was a production worthy of a royal coronation. I can still feel the weight of the diamond-encrusted tiara they placed on my head when I turned 5, its points pinching my scalp as the assembled guests applauded. That night, I learned that beauty could be brittle, and that love, no matter how lavishly bestowed, often came with unseen edges. My brother Brandon was 2 years older, and my first rival. He boasted silver hair that caught the light like moonbeams, and he moved through life with the easy confidence of someone who knew he owned every room. As kids, we competed constantly. Who could recite the Pledge of Allegiance without stumbling? Who could master the piano concerto more flawlessly? Who could best navigate the obstacle course in our backyard, all set against the backdrop of our father's stern praise or our mother's carefully measured nod? I remember one summer afternoon when I beat him at a timed swim across the lake. He sneered as I climbed out of the water, dripping but triumphant, and Victoria handed me a cashmere wrap and said, "Well done, sweetheart," as if awarding an Olympic medal. It was the closest I ever felt to being her true daughter. Yet beneath the velvet-gloved exterior of our family's fortune lay currents of discontent. Victoria raised me with gifts that cost 6 figures, a custom diamond necklace for my 10th birthday, a designer wardrobe that seemed never to fit my shy frame. But she rarely said, "I love you." Instead, her affection arrived in the form of opportunities. Helicopter lessons at 14, a scholarship to the finest boarding school, a guarantee. I chased each accomplishment like a lifeline, desperate for approval that always remained just out of reach. My solace came in the form of Emily Carter, the daughter of our house manager. Emily's world was small but warm: second-hand novels, hand-me-down dresses, and secret picnics in the rose garden where she taught me to see beauty in simplicity. She once slipped me $20 so I could buy an ice cream cone at the county fair. I tasted vanilla bean under strings of carnival lights, and for a moment, I believed happiness could be as straightforward as a childhood treat. Emily and I made a pact then. Whatever paths our lives took, we'd always meet again beneath the Ferris wheel's glow. At 16, I felt the first stirrings of rebellion. I enrolled in ROTC at Sinclair Preparatory Academy, not because I yearned for military life, but because I craved a world governed by clear rules. Unlike the labyrinth of half-truths I navigated at home, I rose to the rank of cadet captain, led my unit to victory in statewide drills, and earned the admiration of my drill sergeant, who handed me a folded flag embroidered with campaign ribbons. "You've got grit, Monroe," he said, using my middle name for formality. "Don't let anyone dull that edge." College came next, an Ivy League education I attended on a full scholarship tied to my ROTC commitment. There, I refined my skills in international relations, excelled in mock negotiations, and graduated summa cum laude. I was 22 when the CIA recruited me, drawn by my record of strategic success and my uncanny ability to anticipate an opponent's move. I remember the day my mentor, Lucas Bennett, handed me my official badge and assignment file. He told me, "Taylor, you're going to change the game," and for the first time, I believed that I could win at a life I'd long been playing by everyone else's rules. But even as I trained in Langley, living on classified bases, and mastering the clandestine arts, a part of me longed for home. I'd call Emily on rainy Sunday afternoons, and she'd remind me of our pact. She'd report on her progress through law school, laugh about old pranks we pulled in the stables, and encourage me to find a cause worth sacrificing for. Her voice was a tether to my childhood, proof that I was more than over the years. I piled up achievements like trophies. 3 successful cyber intelligence operations, each netting $75,000, 0 cents in operational funding. A commendation from the director for thwarting a high-level breach. A covert tour in Berlin that earned me an unmarked envelope stuffed with $25,000, 0 cents in untraceable bills. Yet, with every accolade, I felt the gap widen between the person I pretended to be and the girl who once believed in ice cream cones and secret garden picnics. My final assignment with the agency brought me back to Massachusetts under the cover of a corporate consultancy. It was supposed to be a victory lap, a chance to leverage my experience for a cushy freelance career. Instead, I got the summons from the Sinclairs. An invitation to the family's annual reunion dinner. The wording was polite, almost affectionate. "Taylor, we'd be honored by your presence. It's been far too long since we were together." I felt a flicker of warmth at seeing the old stationery, but it was quickly extinguished by a cold whisper in my gut that this invitation carried an edge sharper than any ceremonial sword. And so I arrived at our ancestral home one autumn evening, under a sky the color of bruised plums. The grounds were immaculate, lit by lanterns that cast long shadows across the cobblestones. I stepped out of my rental car in a tailored suit, carrying a single overnight bag, determined to show them I was no longer the untested girl they'd once dismissed. But as I crossed the threshold, flanked by marble columns and the scent of wisteria, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd walked straight into a lion's den. In that moment, all the memories, my mother's diamond tiaras, my brother's smug victories, Emily's laughter echoing among the rose bushes, coalesced into a single truth. The past had shaped me, but it wouldn't define my future. I was Taylor Monroe, daughter, sister, friend, soldier, spy. And I intended to reclaim every piece of my story, no matter what price the Sinclairs thought they'd pay to rewrite it. I arrived at the Sinclair dining hall under a canopy of crystal chandeliers, their light refracting against the polished marble floors like shards of broken dreams. The room was set for an opulent feast, Gold-trimmed china plates valued at $10,000 per setting. Centerpieces of ivory roses that cost more than my rent for 6 months, and an array of vintage wines stacked in velvet boxes. I stepped carefully onto the carpet, hand-woven silk, rumored to be imported from Persia at a cost of $1 million, and felt the weight of watchful eyes upon me. Brandon stood by the head table, his tailored tuxedo cutting a sharp silhouette against the soft glow of candlelight. He offered me a tight-lipped smile, his blue eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. "Welcome home, Taylor," he murmured, voice smooth as aged whiskey. My pulse quickened, and raised my chin and whispered, "Thank you for the invitation." Inside, I braced myself for the gathering storm. My first red flag was subtle, the marginal deviation in the menu. I noticed nods exchanged between our family's chef and the sommelier when I asked about the lobster bisque. The server stammered, "This is a new vintage, very exclusive," and poured the wine with an extra flourish. I caught a flicker of recognition in his eyes, the same expression I'd seen in an arms dealer's liaison when I interrogated him overseas. Something was off. I scanned the table for Martha, our longtime housekeeper turned uneasy accomplice. She sat discreetly in the corner of the room, her hands trembling as she fumbled with a silver platter. When our eyes met, she blinked rapidly and slipped a discreet note beneath her chin before rising to refill someone's glass. I waited until she passed behind a marble column to read it. Project Phoenix financial transfer $2 million USD. Check USB tonight. My heart pounded. Emily had sent this, but who was Emily at this table? I realized Chloe had assumed that alias for her own protection. As the first course arrived, I forced a smile and accepted the Margot 1998 poured by Sterling. The wine's ruby hue shimmered in the candlelight. I raised the glass and tasted it deliberately. The flavor was silky at first, notes of black cherry and tobacco, but there was an undertone of bitterness, like burnt almonds. Poison. My training screamed caution. I sipped discreetly and set the glass aside, watching as Brandon cleared his throat to speak. "Family," he began, voice low and controlled. "We're honored to share this evening with Taylor. Let us toast to loyalty and legacy." They all raised their glasses. I remained still, my knuckles whitening around the stem of my water glass. Underneath polished words, I sensed a darker toast: my downfall. Midway through the main course, filet mignon, carved tableside, at a suggested price of $500 per serving. I excused myself to the powder room. In the mirrored walls, I caught my reflection. Cheeks flushed, eyes darting, I whispered to myself, "Stay focused." From my purse, I retrieved a portable chemical test strip and dipped it into a drop from the wine glass. The strip's indicator shifted in seconds. Positive for cyanide. Panic rose like bile. I exhaled slowly, bought more time. On my way back, I paused at the entrance to the library, where the family's financial ledgers were displayed in an antique glass case. One ledger stood ajar. Jerling's handwriting spilled across a page. $2 million USD. Project Phoenix. Beneath it, a hastily scribbled phone number. I memorized the digits, mentally recording them against a midnight rendezvous location. Every piece clicked: the email, the ledger, the poison. Returning to the table, I maintained a serene facade. Victoria leaned forward, her perfume a blend valued at $200 an ounce wafting over me. "Are you well, dear?" she purred. I nodded, smiling. "Delightful evening, mother," but inside I plotted. I would confront them, but not tonight. I needed more confirmation. I needed proof to bring them down. While dinner concluded, I observed Brandon step away to the library, probably to secure or destroy more documents. His gait was tense. I waited until the dessert course was served, dark chocolate souffle plated with gold leaf that cost nearly $1,000 per serving, and then left the hall under the pretense of fetching fresh air. The terrace was cool, scent of night-blooming jasmine mixing with the crisp autumn. I slipped the test strip into my pocket and checked my phone for Emily's follow-up. I sent a coded text. Phoenix ignites at midnight. Confirm assets and exit route. Within seconds her reply, meet at the boathouse. Trust no one. I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that had propelled me through undercover operations in Berlin and high-risk data seizures in Langley. The line between operative and family member blurred. They thought they were orchestrating my endgame. Little did they know, I was already writing their eulogy. As the clock struck 10, I slipped through the manor's corridors, memorizing guard rotations, and cutting through servant tunnels I'd discovered years ago. The boathouse sat at the edge of the private dock, illuminated only by the moon's reflection on the water. There, Chloe stepped out of the shadows, USB in hand, and eyes bright with determination. I got everything, she whispered, voice trembling. Emails, transfers, even the video of Brandon and Mother plotting your death. It's all here. She handed me the drive. My fingers closed around it, and I felt the tide turn. First signs of trouble had morphed into the first steps of my counterattack. In that moment, beneath the silent gaze of the lake, I realized I wasn't merely escaping a trap. I was reclaiming my power. The Sinclair dynasty had underestimated me, and as I slipped the US gun into my coat, I smiled, knowing the real game was about to begin. I stood at the threshold of the wine cellar, dread coiling in my stomach like a poisonous snake. The heavy oak door swung silently inward at my push, revealing rows of ancient barrels and dusty bottles, each labeled with years of indulgence by the Sinclair dynasty. The only light came from a flickering overhead bulb, casting long shadows across the stone floor. I felt the cold air brush against my skin as I stepped inside, senses prime for danger. Martha's note burned in my pocket. Project Phoenix, tonight. I crept forward, mindful of every creak of the floorboards. A distant voice reached my ears, clipped and urgent. I recognized Brandon's tone immediately. He never managed his word like that. He was coiled with malice. I edged closer to the darkness, eyes straining for movement. "Martha, are you sure?" the voice hissed, heavy with steel. "Completely," came Victoria's reply, low and venomous. "She's exactly where we want her, in the belly of the beast. Once she's incapacitated, no one will suspect." A third voice intervened. "Richard, colder. And the cameras." Richard's baratural. "Disabled." Michael Turner confirmed it. "No footage, no witnesses." My heart hammered. They were discussing my execution as if planning a charity gala. Betrayal crystallized. Not a family reunion, but a premeditated hunt. I had to record them. With trembling fingers, I retrieved the miniature recording device Lucas had given me, costing more than my first year's salary, slipped into my coat pocket, and edged closer behind a row of oak barrels. Sterling continued, voice clinical. Course 3, the cyanide-laced confections. By then, the effect will be irreversible. Victoria chuckled, a sound like shards of glass. Ensure her wrists are bound after the toast. Let her struggle, it'll make it look accidental. I exhaled slowly, every breath a battle. The device nestled warm against my side as I backed away. Evidence secured. Now I needed a plan to deliver it. As I crept out of the cellar, I passed a stack of overturned crates, and behind them spotted Martha, huddled with Emily Carter, her eyes wide with guilt. They exchanged a glance, confirming the conspiracy's reach even among those I believed allies. Panting, I ascended the narrow servant stairs, each step echoing in the hush. My mind raced. The USB drive handed off to Kimberly Jordan tonight could seal their fate. But first, I needed an intermediary. Emily would be too high-profile. Martha's loyalty wavered under pressure. I resolved to use the house's old pneumatic tube system, well hidden behind the butler's pantry, to send a coded message to my lawyer's sidekick, who would then retrieve the package from the staff mailroom. At the kitchen entrance, I paused as a tray of hors d'oeuvres rattled in a server's hands. The baker, oblivious, hummed softly as he wheeled a cart. I slipped past him and into the pantry, heart pounding. Inside, I found the pneumatic tube control panel, a simple brass lever and a worn plaque reading "to main wing office." I pulled open the mail slot and deposited a sealed envelope containing the drive and instructions. Immediate handoff to Jordan team. Red code, Taylor Monroe. The lever hissed as I depressed it, sending the envelope clattering down the tube with a finality that echoed like a verdict. My phone vibrated, a single text from Lucas. Status. I thumbed out. Audio secured. Tube used. Phase 1 complete. His reply came seconds later. Good, proceed with bait. Bait, a reenactment of allyship. I reattached a discreet microcamera to my collar and returned to the cellar entrance, just as Brandon flicked the light switch off, the room succumbing to darkness. He stumbled, curse catching in his throat. I emerged from the shadows. Looking for me? I asked, voice calm. The silence that followed was thick with shock. Brandon's chest heaved. Taylor, how? Oh, I know all about Project Phoenix, I said, stepping into the dim glow of an emergency lamp. The barbiturate in the wine, the cyanide desserts, the disabled cameras. I tapped the recorder hidden at my waist. I recorded every word. He paled, eyes flicking to the recorder. You can't prove, watch me, I interrupted. From my coat I withdrew the envelope icon of Martha's name printed on the return label and flung it at him. That went through the tube 10 minutes ago. Kimberly Jordan will have this in her hands by midnight. Brandon's jaw clenched. You're insane. I shrugged, stepping closer. I'm just very, very alive. Before he could react, I pivoted and sprinted up the stone steps toward the main hall, adrenaline propelling me. Behind me I heard the cellar door crash open, footsteps pursuing, but I didn't look back. As I burst into the grand foyer, torchlight danced on marble, a carnival of shadow and gold. I pivoted to face them. Victoria's pale stare, Richard's incredulous gape, Brandon's furious lunge, halted by a butler's timely interposition. Taylor, Victoria breathed, voice brittle. What have you done? I steadied myself, chest heaving. What you've done to me. Enjoy the show. In that moment the trap reversed. They'd set out to bury me, but I dug the grave and redirected the collapse. The Sinclair betrayal had reached its apex, and now the family would face the reckoning they so meticulously planned for me. I stumbled into the guest suite, shutting the door behind me so hard the lock groaned. My chest felt like it was about to cave in under the weight of betrayal. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Memories of Victoria's icy smile and Brandon's cold laughter replaced in my mind like a broken record. The walls seemed to close in, and I sank to the floor, sliding down until I sat against polished mahogany paneling. Tears came unbidden. I pressed my palms against my face, letting the warmth of my tears remind me that I was still alive. Each drop was a reminder of every lesson I'd learned, that trust could shatter like crystal, and that love could disguise a noose. I let myself mourn the illusions I'd held so dear. The glamorous dinners, the promises of family unity, the belief that I belonged. I remembered the first time Victoria kissed my forehead, a rare gesture she gave when I'd won a scholarship at 14. At the time, I'd felt it as genuine affection, but now it felt like a cold pretense. Every gift she bestowed, diamond necklaces, designer gowns, helicopter lessons, seemed purchased, not given. The applause of high-profile benefactors at gala balls felt hollow compared to the authenticity I craved. The suite spun around me as I closed my eyes and listened to the faint hum of the air conditioner. The steady ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway outside sounded like a countdown to oblivion. I envisioned that clock face shattering, shards of glass raining down on me. When I opened my eyes, I barely recognized the woman staring back in the mirror across the room. Pale skin framed by tangled hair, eyes rimmed red, lips pressed into a thin line of determination. That stranger had assumed my identity. Anger rose within me, fierce and scorching. I slammed my fist against the wall, leaving a bruise blossoming on my knuckles. How could they? I choked out. My own family. The silence responded, and in that silence, I heard the echo of my own suppressed rage. I felt as though I was split in two, the shattered girl I'd been, and the hardened survivor I was becoming. I rose unsteadily, dusting flecks of carpet from my pants, and paced the length of the room. I counted my breaths, each inhale a struggle, each exhale a release. I whispered words I'd kept locked away for years. I am not their pawn. The realization burned hotter than the pain in my chest. They believed they could destroy me with poison and deception, but they had only polished the blade I held at my own throat. I sank onto the edge of the bed, running my fingers over the carved headboard. The linen was smooth under my palm, untouched by the chaos unfolding downstairs. I let my hand drift to the scar on my wrist from my first field operation, a reminder of the sacrifice I'd made for the CIA. That scar, once a badge of honor, now felt like a brand, marking me as expendable. Memories of Emily Carter flickered through my mind, her laughter echoing under rose arbors, her steadfast promise to always meet under the Ferris heel. I felt her presence like a lighthouse, guiding me back from the brink. Closing my eyes, I heard her voice. Trust no one but yourself. In that echo, I found a flicker of hope amid the wreckage. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the USB drive, heavy with the weight of proof and retribution. My thumb traced the engraved letters. PX. I cradled it like a lifeline line. Grief gave way to purpose. Jack, my hand still trembled as I crossed to the desk and picked up a pen. On a fresh sheet of hotel stationery, I scribbled a single line. I will not be broken. I paused, reading the words. They felt small against the enormity of betrayal, but they carried the promise of defiance. I struck through will not and wrote again. I am unbreakable. The act of writing settled something deep inside me. I felt the surge of adrenaline I'd known in field ops, the calm focus before a mission. I drafted bullet points for my next steps. Contact Kimberly Jordan, initiate legal action, leak evidence to select journalist, prepare for the inevitable counterattack. Each point sharpened my resolve, like straps tightening on body armor. By the time I set the pen down, the tears had dried, replaced by a fierce clarity. The guest suite, once a refuge, now felt like a command center for my comeback. I smoothed my hair, straightened my jacket, and inhaled a steadying breath. My reflection in the mirror no longer showed the frightened girl I'd been moments ago, but a warrior ready to reclaim her story. I gathered my jacket and slipped the USB into its inner pocket. With one last glance at the framed family portrait on the wall, smiling faces frozen in time. I collapse against the cold stone wall beneath the sweeping grand staircase, breath ragged, mind racing. My phone buzzed, a message from Lucas Bennett Funds Wire, check secure vault. Relief and a fresh surge of adrenaline flooded me as I slid open the concealed maintenance hatch behind a loose panel. There, embedded into the foundation, sat the secure vault, a reinforced steel box with a digital keypad, its display pulsing softly in the dim light. I knelt, wiped sweat from my brow, then entered the code Lucas had texted moments before, 13.2986. The vault clicked, the door swung open, and I peeled back the velvet-lined interior to reveal stacks of unmarked envelopes and a lockbox stamped Emergency Ops. Inside were crisp bills totaling $150,000, 0 cents, a spare forged passport in my name, and a burner phone preloaded with encrypted contacts. My fingers trembled as I scooped up the cash and passport, folding the phone into my jacket. With resources secured, I texted my lawyer Kimberly Jordan. Funds received. Proceed with plan. Within minutes came her reply. Excellent. I've arranged a secure conference room at the Carlton Tower Hotel. Meet at 1 o'clock. Bring evidence. The precision and calm in her words grounded me. She was the architect of my legal counterstrike, the anchor to my storm. Next, I needed more proof. I slipped through servant corridors, each footstep measured, and made my way to the housekeeping office, posing as staff on an errand. Inside, I found Emily Carter, still alias Chloe, huddled over a laptop, eyes bright with fear and determination. Taylor, she whispered, glancing up. I've decrypted the emails, over 300 messages, detailing off-book transfers, shell companies, and your planned elimination. I've also secured the surveillance footage from the boathouse camera, exonerating any claims they might spin. I hugged her, heart pounding with gratitude. You're a lifesaver. She handed me a slim USB drive stamped top secret, her hand shaking. This is everything. But we need more than digital files they can claim fabrication. We need a paper trail. I nodded. Michael Turner's ledger. We saw it and Emily swallowed. It's guarded in his personal safe at the estate's finance office, but I can't get in alone. Then we do it together. I outlined a quick plan. I'd create a diversion at the East Wing, trigger the fire alarm in a service corridor, while she slipped into Turner's office, photographed the hard cop ledgers, then meet me back at the hatch. 5 minutes later, I crouched near the East Wing's electrical panel. With a small toolkit Lucas had provided, I short-circuited the wiring. Lights flickered, a high-pitched alarm wailed through the halls. Footsteps pounded as security scrambled. "Now," I hissed into Emily's earpiece. She slipped past a pair of panicked guards and darted into Turner's office. I heard the click of a camera, rapid flashes as she photographed rows of bound ledgers. Entries showing $2,300,000, 0 cents, in untraceable payments labeled Project Phoenix and Discretionary Purge. Within minutes, she backed out, slipping the USB and memory cards into my waiting hand. We retreated to the hatch, backs pressed against damp stone, hearts thundering. I locked the vault and snapped the panel shut. We exchanged a brief, tense look. "Everything?" I asked. Emily nodded, relief flooding her features. "Let's go." As we emerged into a deserted corridor, I dialed Kimberly's burner line. "I'm on my way." Her voice was calm. "Good. I've prepared the paperwork. I'll meet you outside the service entrance." We slipped past the panicked staff, blending into the chaos. Outside, a black SUV idled under a flickering street lamp. The engine purred as I slid into the back seat, USB drives and documents clutched to my chest. Emily followed, and the door shut with a muted click. Inside, Kimberly greeted us with a nod. The car pulled away, gliding through moonlit streets, toward Boston's Carlton Tower. My heart slowed as the SUV gained speed. I was safe, at least for now. In the back seat's dim glow, I sorted the evidence. 2 USBs, memory cards, printed ledger pages, and the cell phone with contact lists. I counted the cash, $150,000, 0 cents, and slipped everything into a waterproof pouch. Then, with trembling hands, I placed the forged passport and burner phone atop the pile. Kimberly observed me in the rearview mirror. "You did well. We'll file these with the court at first light. I've also arranged for press embargoes, select opposition reporters, who'll publish as soon as the injunction is granted." I exhaled, feeling a tension I hadn't known since field ops, the calm just before action. "Thank you," I whispered. "I couldn't have done this without you." She offered a tight smile. "Rest ready. Tomorrow we move." As the SUV slid into the hotel's underground entrance, I pressed my forehead to the cool glass window. The city's lights blurred, each one a promise of the next battle. The spark had been struck. I had funds, evidence, legal firepower, and allies. Recovery had begun. For the first time since arriving at the Sinclair estate, I felt hope. The darkness that had threatened to drown me receded, replaced by a strategic clarity. The Sinclair dynasty had thought they'd erased me. Instead, they'd forged me anew, sharper, stronger, ready to reclaim my life and deliver justice. The valet popped the trunk. Kimberly gestured for us to follow. As we stepped into the hotel lobby, I squared my shoulders and met Emily's determined gaze. Together we ascended to the boardroom floor. The battle for my future had truly begun, and now I had everything I needed to win. I sat in the back of the black SUV, heartbeat echoing like distant drums. Kimberly Jordan and Emily Carter across from me reviewed the evidence spread on the seat. glossy ledger pages, glowing USD drives, memory cards etched with top secret, and the printed transcripts of my covert recording. The Carlton Tower Hotel's underground garage felt worlds away from the Sinclair estate's polished opulence. Here, beneath flickering fluorescent lights, I could breathe again and plan my counterattack. "Taylor," Kimberly began, voice low and firm. "We've filed the preliminary injunction. The court has frozen the Sinclair assets and prevented them from dissipating funds. The judge is revealing our motion, but we're on schedule." She slid me a slim folder stamped confidential, containing the injunction paperwork. My fingers tightened around it, feeling the weight of legal authority. I exhaled. They won't see it coming. The thrill of seizing initiative pulsed through me. Emily reached for the USB I'd labeled Phoenix Audio. "This goes first to the media. Once the injunction is in place at first light, we feed this to the press. Let the world hear Victoria Sinclair plotting poison." She tapped the drive. I nodded. The plan was precise. Evidence to journalists, parallel legal action, and public pressure mounting like a tidal wave. It felt like coordinating a multi-judgency operation, only now my target was my own family. Once parked and papers signed, we entered the car elevator. The doors glided shut, carrying us upward. I steadied my breathing. Below, the Sinclair empire trembled above. The city awaited revelation. At 6:00 a.m. before sunrise, I sat at a mahogany boardroom table in the hotel's executive suite. Sunlight bled over the horizon, illuminating skyscrapers. On massive flat-screen monitors, Charlotte Donovan from the Boston Herald prepared her live report. Next to her, legal analysts cued the injunction details. I watched from the couch, resolute. "Taylor Monroe," Charlotte said on air, "tomorrow at 9 a.m. Clock Rock. The Suffolk County Superior Court will hold a hearing to determine the freezing order on the Sinclair family's assets, following allegations of attempted murder, conspiracy, and financial fraud. Exclusive documents obtained by this station reveal audio of Victoria Sinclair plotting to poison her daughter, and ledgers showing off book transfers totaling over $5 million, 0 cents. Ms. Monroe joins us now." The feed cut to me. I inhaled. Facing dozens of cameras, I recapped the betrayal succinctly. I discovered evidence of attempted murder and financial malfeasance orchestrated by my mother and brother. I took these recordings and documents directly to the court to ensure the truth emerges. Reporters scribbled notes, lights flashed. I maintained composure, no soldier's discipline more vital than in public sight. After the segment, Kimberly nudged me. In her eyes was pride and relief. "That was solid," she whispered. "Now we shift to the legal front." We packed our belongings, moving to the courthouse steps where dozens of protesters held signs, reading "Justice for Taylor Monroe" and "No More Sinclairs." A throng of live camera crews clustered. I stepped onto the stone steps, inhaled cool air, and faced the microphone. I repeated key facts and promised full cooperation with investigators. My words were measured, yet charged with emotion. The Sinclair dynasty believed they could silence me. Today, their empire stands exposed. Applause broke out from supporters, while courtroom guards signaled us forward. Inside the courthouse, I settled in the witness chair. The judge, a stern figure in robes, reviewed the file. Across the aisle, Andrew Dalton, the Sinclair's lead attorney, sat flanked by Richard and Victoria, their faces ashen. Brandon was absent. I'd learned he remained in custody on unrelated charges after a preemptive surrender. Now, he watched from the rear benches. Kimberly rose to argue. She laid out a timeline of the conspiracy. Initial poisoning plot, cyanide tests, ledger evidence, shell company transfers, attempted asset concealment. She presented charted exhibits of shell entities, annotated financial flows, and the audio recording. The Sinclair defense objected, claiming entrapment and fabrication, but after a brief sidebar, the exhibits were deemed admissible. The judge nodded gravely. When it was my turn, I recounted my ordeal, waking bound in darkness, hearing my mother and brother plotting over quantifiable stakes, $2 million diverted, $50,000 bets on my death, and instructions to disable surveillance. I described photos I'd taken of ledgers and memorized the phone number scrawled in my grandmother's diary. When I named my mother, the courtroom was deathly silent, the weight of betrayal palpable. After my testimony, I met Michael Turner in a cordoned hallway. The forensic accountant's analysis was damning. Discrepancies of $3,700,000, 0 cents over 3 years, phantom transactions to offshore firms. He handed me a printed summary. "This will seal the fraud count," he said, eyes serious. I nodded, gratitude and resolve intertwining. By mid-afternoon, the judge issued a preliminary ruling. Freeze all Sinclair family accounts, including trusts, corporations, and personal holdings. Asset freeze enacted immediately. Additionally, subpoenas were granted for internal documents and a special master appointed to oversee collections. A full evidentiary hearing was scheduled in 2 weeks, a timeline we would use to prepare our criminal referrals and civil suits. We rose and Kimberly squeezed my shoulder. Phase 2 locked in. Outside, the crowd cheered. Emily hugged me, tears shining. Journalists clamored for quotes. I addressed them one last time. People often think power protects them. Today, I proved it does not. Then I retreated to the waiting SUV, feeling a potent mix of fatigue and exhilaration. That evening, Kimberly and I debriefed in my temporary suite. We reviewed next steps, file criminal referrals with the district attorney's office, handle classified depositions for Victoria and Richard, and prepare for Brandon's interrogation if he were called. I opened the folder of media clips already trending for Monroe Sinclair, while Kimberly mapped out defense strategies for anticipated counter-motions. I admired her meticulous notes, deadlines, case law references, media embargo date. I felt an unfamiliar calm like the eye of a storm. The world knew my truth, the Sinclair's downfall had begun. Yet there was more ahead. Grand jury testimony, discovery disputes, potential verdict. This was not a sprint but a marathon. I would need every ounce of stamina I had honed in the field. As midnight approached, I drafted a personal note to Emily. "Thank you for standing by me. I couldn't have done this without your courage." I sent it. Then, to Lucas. "Operational funds running low. Can we arrange another transfer?" His reply flickered on my phone. Processed. Check secure vault at dawn. Relief washed over me, another spark of support in my fight. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, memorizing its ornate molding. For so long, I'd felt trapped by the Sinclair legacy. Now, with strategy deployed and allies at my side, I felt the tables turning decisively in my favor. I was no longer their prey, but the hunter, and the Sinclair empire would soon learn the full extent of my resolve. In the quiet hours before the injunction hearing, I found solitude to honor the people who became my true family. Emily Carter stands foremost in my thoughts. I recall our childhood in the Sinclair estate's rose garden, where she taught me what loyalty meant. The daughter of our house manager, she had no wealth besides her unwavering principles. On her first day at Harvard School of Law, I arranged a discreet donation through Lucas so she could afford textbooks. When she called me later that evening, her voice crackling with joy, I realized that success, achieved on your own terms, is the sweetest. And then there is Lucas Bennett, my mentor and confidant. A retired operations chief with a calm demeanor, he taught me to read the spaces between words and to trust instincts. After I graduated from the CIA's clandestine training program, he welcomed me into his modest townhouse, brown wood bookshelves lined with case files and botanical prints painted by his niece. He brewed strong coffee as we debriefed missions under a single desk lamp. I will never forget the evening he shared his sister's story, a divorce settlement protected by discreet surveillance, which showed me that skills meant for battle could safeguard loved ones. In the aftermath of my narrow escape from the wine cellar, Lucas arranged a refuge in his main safe house. The rustic cabin perched above a silent cove, its windows framing ocean vistas I hadn't seen since childhood. He stocked the pantry with my favorite comfort foods, dark chocolate almonds and starfruit jam, and left a note scrawled in neat handwriting. Reset mind and body. Begin with breakfast. The gesture mattered more than the meal. It reminded me that rebuilding strength was as much emotional as tactical. In those dawn hours, I allowed myself to rest, to plan my next move with clarity. Emily and Lucas embodied the truth that chosen family can transcend blood ties. Emily's loyalty and legal prowess gave me the courage to stand in court, while Lucas's belief in my capabilities fueled my strategic resolve. Their interventions were never about obligation, they were acts of true care. In every late-night call Emily risked her career to place, I felt her faith in me. As I face the coming trial, I carry their stories with me. They remind me that justice is not a solitary pursuit, but a collective journey, and trust. The day the judge read the sentence, the courtroom felt like a coliseum filled with silent spectators. I watched from the witness gallery as Victoria Sinclair rose to receive her fate. The mahogany-paneled walls, once echoing with whispered conspiracies, now absorbed the gravity of justice. The presiding judge cleared her throat and announced Victoria Alexandra Sinclair is hereby convicted of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and financial fraud involving misappropriation of corporate assets. She is sentenced to 20 years in state prison. A hush fell. Victoria's shoulders slumped, her diamond brooch worth an estimated $75,000, 0 cents, gleaming dully in the overhead light. Richard Sinclair's turn came next. His lips trembled as he stood. The judge pronounced, Richard Montgomery Sinclair is convicted of aiding and abetting conspiracy and embezzlement. He shall serve 25 years to run concurrently with his wife's sentence and pay restitution of $8,400,000, 0 cents. I noted the precise language, concurrently, restitution, $8,400,000, 0 cents. Legal terms sharpened the finality. Across the aisle, Brandon Sinclair sat with shoulders hunched. He'd agreed to a plea deal earlier that morning, 15 years and immediate designation as a hostile witness. He glared at me, betrayal and envy warring in his eyes. A clerk read the asset forfeiture order. The Sinclair estate at 127 Hemlock Ridge, valued at $50 million, 0 cents. The private yacht Elysium, valued at $12 million, 0 cents. Ashford Holdings and the Cayman Trusts, assets totaling $27,500,000. These are hereby seized for restitution and forfeited to the Commonwealth. My heart thudded, their empire laid bare. After the pronouncements, the bailiffs moved in. Victoria's silk scarf dropped to the floor, a single strand of pearls rolled away. I resisted the urge to step forward instead. I watched as she was led off, heels clicking on marble. Richard's protests were muffled by the guards' firm grips. Brandon, handcuffed, avoided my gaze, his expression unreadable. Outside, cameras flashed as the Sinclair family emerged in restraints. Reporters shouted questions. Were you plotting your daughter's murder? How do you plead? I inhaled, the cold air biting my lungs. The weight of months of planning lifted, replaced by a quiet satisfaction. That afternoon, the state auctioned portions of the seized assets. News outlets reported that the Hemlock Ridge mansion sold for $62 million, 0 cents above the assessed value, while Elysium went for $14 million, 0 cents. The offshore accounts were liquidated, generating an additional $25 million, 0 cents. Back at my temporary office, I reviewed the final restitution order. The judge had allocated funds, 60% to cover legal fees and victims' compensation, 40% directed into a survivor's trust, established in my name. The trust would support advocacy for family betrayal survivors, a cause I intended to champion. That evening, I visited the now empty Sinclair estate one last time. The gates were open, the driveway strewn with fallen autumn leaves. I walked through the grand foyer, pausing by the shattered chandelier where I'd first sensed danger. In the main hall, dust motes floated in shafts of fading sunlight. I let my fingers brush the wooden banister, remembering every echo of deceit. In the parlor I found Martha, cleaning up the remnants of our last dinner. She looked up, eyes red. "You did it, Miss Monroe." She placed a small velvet box in my hand, a single pearl earring. "For your courage." I tucked it into my pocket. As I left through the French doors onto the terrace, I turned back once. The Sinclair legacy, built on power and privilege, lay in ruins. Yet from those ruins, I'd forged something new: justice, resilience, and a purpose beyond vengeance. I stepped onto the gravel path, the cool evening breeze lifting my hair. I whispered to the empty halls, "This is your reckoning." Then I walked away, each step carrying me farther from betrayal and closer to the life I would build on my own terms, unbound and unbroken. The morning after the sentencing, I found myself on the deck of a small cabin overlooking Penobscot Bay in Maine. The air was crisp, the horizon painted in pastel hues as dawn broke. I sipped a cup of dark roast coffee ground locally and roasted by a friend of Lucas's for the first time in days without urgency tightening my chest. The cabin was modest: reclaimed pine floors, a stone fireplace, and a small vegetable patch out back, already sprouting kale, lettuce, and herbs I'd planted the previous evening. Each shoot felt like a promise: growth, renewal, and the freedom I had fought so fiercely to reclaim. I spent my mornings tending to the garden, the rhythm of pulling weeds and turning soil grounding me. The Sinclair estate's opulence felt like a distant dream as I measured the neat rows of heirloom tomatoes and beets in raised beds I'd built with my own hands. I recalled the judge's words about the survivor's trust and the $200,000 0 cents book advance offer from a major publisher. It felt surreal. Yet here, earth under my fingernails and the sun warming my back. It felt entirely real. Afternoons were dedicated to reflection and planning. I set up a makeshift office in the loft, my laptop, binders filled with court transcripts, and a leather-bound journal for ideas. I drafted chapter outlines for my memoir, tentatively titled Beneath the Crystal Chandelier. The proposed advance would cover travel expenses and research, but more importantly, the book would be my platform to speak on betrayal, resilience, and the power of chosen family. Lucas visited once a week, arriving in his weathered Jeep Cherokee. He'd bring homemade bread baked in his daughter's kitchen and jars of her signature blueberry jam. We'd sit by the fireplace, sipping chamomile tea, and strategize my next advocacy moves, partnering with survivors' networks, planning fundraising galas, and launching a foundation funded by the Survivors Trust to support people escaping toxic family dynamics. His calm presence reminded me I wasn't alone. Emily, now my legal partner, helped me finalize the foundation's bylaws over video calls from her law office near Boston. Her laughter echoed through the laptop speakers as we balanced budgets and mission statements. We agreed the foundation would provide pro bono legal aid, emergency financial grants, and mentoring elements that had saved me in my darkest hour. Evenings were reserved for quiet rituals. I'd light a lantern on the porch, journal the day's victories, small and large, like the first successful harvest of spinach or the heartwarming note from a reader who'd followed my story online. I added these entries to a growing gratitude list, a practice Emily taught me to counterbalance years of distrust. One afternoon, I received an unexpected letter from the publisher. "We want to fast-track your manuscript. Release date 6 months from now. Marketing budget approved." My heart leapt. A wave of relief and excitement washed over me. I called Emily, who cheered on the other end. "You're going to change lives," she said. In the solitude of the Maine woods, I also confronted lingering wounds. I revisited old memories in meditation, my mother's half-hearted praise, Brandon's smug grin, the taste of fear in the cellar, but instead of pain, I felt perspective. Those experiences were chapters in my life, not the epilogue. I visualized the glass chandelier shattering and the shards transforming into stepping stones leading me forward. As summer turned to early fall, I hosted a small gathering at the cabin, a potluck dinner under string lights. Martha arrived shyly, carrying fresh eggs she'd collected from her farm stand. Michael Turner joined, bringing artisan cheese and stories of his daughter's school play. Lucas, at that table, I wasn't a prosecutor or a CIA operative. I was simply Taylor, a friend, neighbor, and survivor. The trust fund would soon launch, my book would tell my story, the foundation would open its doors. Yet the most profound lesson was already clear. The most precious legacy is the one you choose to build, not the one you inherit. One weekend, I took a stall at the Camden Farmers Market, selling heirloom tomatoes and fresh basil. A woman named Claire approached, sharing her own story of escaping an abusive family. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "You gave me hope." In that moment, I understood the ripple effect of speaking truth. The following week, a local teacher invited me to speak to her students about integrity and resilience. Standing before bright-eyed teenagers, I recounted my journey and the lessons learned. Their questions about courage, trust, and finding purpose reinforced the truth I'd discovered. Vulnerability can be a source of strength. One evening, a package arrived from an anonymous supporter, a hand-bound journal inscribed, "For Taylor, who turns pain into power." Inside was a simple note, "Keep going." I pinned it above my desk. a daily reminder that even far from the courtroom spotlight, the fight for justice and healing continued. As summer's light faded into the golden hues of autumn, I reflected back on my journey from the Sinclair estate's gleaming halls to this humble cabin. I whispered to the night, "I am more than their cruelty. I am my own compass." The book deal, the foundation, and the survivor's trust were chapters in a larger story, one of transformation, purpose, and enduring hope. I closed my journal, stepping onto the deck as a cold breeze swept in from the bay. Lanterns glowed softly behind me, but my eyes were fixed on the horizon. The future stretched before me like an open road, and for the first time in my life, I was guiding the way.